Hey, good evening, everybody. So good to see you. So good to see you. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Shake the Table. I'm your host, Will Horn. And again, I'm so excited that you all are here on tonight. Listen, I don't know about you all. I was struggling a little bit because, we're at the end of the year. In what I do, working in higher education, you have to try to wind everything down before the semester is over. And so that's where all of my attention has been. So I had not really been thinking a whole lot about us being in the Christmas season. But do you all realize that in a week it'll be Christmas? It's like, where did the year go? But I'm just excited about that. Excited to have come thus far by faith, to be at a place where we're able to celebrate friends and family and life and love and reconciling relationships with one another, all of the good things that the holiday season represents. And so I'm so glad, again, to be in this season, and so glad to be here with you all. I'm going to tell you how much I appreciate you all. Just throughout the week, many times you all send messages and just affirmations and things like that. And that really makes a big difference, particularly for a table shaker like me, because sometimes I say some things that ruffle feathers. I have a grace to do it, but there are times, it gets kind of hard. It gets a little disappointing and disheartening because it just seems like a lot of times people don't get it. They're I don't want to say behind. They're just in a different place. But I'm so grateful again for those of you who really hear the voice of truth through my voice, and that you all take that time to reach back and to affirm me. So, again, thank you all again for being here. I'm so excited about this opportunity that we get to spend some time together. Before we jump into the topic, I want to hear from you all. You know how it is. I like you all to be active in the chat. I like for you all to put your ideas and your questions and interact with one another even. I try to watch the chat as much as possible, but I got my notes, so I try to stay on my notes and everything to get everything in. But if you would just shout out where you're tuning in from, what state, what city, what country. We have people sometimes log in from Kenya and from South Africa and other places like that. So I would love to know where you all are from. Hey, table shakers, it's good to see everybody. Brother Daniel, I see you. First Lady, I see you. I appreciate you being on here. Brother Kevin from New York, I see you on here. Listen, would you all do me a favor and share this link with your folks and let them know that we're on and we're having this conversation on tonight. We're really trying to build this community, this YouTube community. It's sometimes I think I was a little addicted to Facebook. I was doing Facebook Live mainly because again, that's where the people are. But sometimes you just have to beckon the people to come where you are. And so if you would just share the link, send it to people's inbox, put it on your wall, send smoke signals, however it is you do it, and let them know that we're shaking tables over here tonight. Okay. So, hey, Omaha, Dallas, I see you all. Brooklyn, Houston in the house. It's good to see you all. Good to see everybody. But as I said, I want to get into this topic tonight. For those of you who have been paying attention, I guess, to my little advertisements, so to speak, to let you know what's going on. We're dealing with the topic tonight that is kind of difficult to talk about, to be honest with you. It's difficult for a few reasons. One, hey, Indianapolis, I see you. Montgomery, Alabama, I see you. It's difficult to talk about it for a couple of reasons, and maybe even more than this, but just two that really stand out for me. Number one, when we have these conversations, really about things like sexual assault, um, uh, abuse, when we talk about things, particularly tonight, pedophilia, when we talk about those things, it triggers a lot of people, and for some people, it triggers them because they were victims. Maybe I should say are victims, because it's sometimes you never get over those things. You learn how to live with them, but you never get over being violated or abused or brutalized even. And so it's difficult to talk about it in that regard. For others of us who have a pastoral heart or a paternal or fatherly heart, it is incensing. It makes you angry to think about the most vulnerable, our children, being taken advantage of. It makes you angry. And I actually had to have a conversation with myself today, even as I was preparing notes, because I could feel, you know how when you get mad, sometimes the top of your ears get hot. Anybody else feel that? Like your ears get red and you can feel yourself getting angry. And I started to feel that when I was studying and preparing for our time tonight. But I recognize that for us to have a responsible, lucid, generative conversation about this, where we can really try to crack some things open, that I kind of had to get my head straight. Okay. And so I'm saying that to you all, that if you were triggered tonight, and I mean this from the depths of my spirit, if you are triggered tonight, I want you to log off. Okay. Because your well-being, your mental health and emotional health is important to me. Okay. And so again, if at any time this triggers you in a way that brings about some very uncomfortable feelings, I want you to log off and maybe come back later. Or if you need to reach out to me one-on-one, then maybe we can have some conversation. Okay. I just want you to know that I'm sensitive to that. Okay. But we want to talk tonight. And I want to deal with how I titled this conversation tonight. I called it The Theology of the Christian Pedophile. There's all kinds of craziness in that title, and I know it. It seems like none of those words should go together. Theology and Christian and the idea of pedophilia. How can that all play together? And I want to do my best tonight to help us with those intersections and to help us to understand. Because again, here on Shake the Table, we are always talking about theology, which is the through line that cuts across all of the things that we talk about, because I have come to believe and to understand that our theology shows up in everything that we do, whether we are aware of it or conscious of it or not. The way that we see God, the way that we think about God, which then informs how we talk about God, how we see or do not see God in our neighbor. All of that shows up. All of that is manifested based upon a theological perspective that we have. And even people who are abusers have a theological perspective. It may be toxic, it may be harmful, it may be downright dangerous, but they have a theological perspective that drives what they do. Okay. I hope just at the very beginning, you're understanding the premise of this conversation. Okay. And so I want to dig into that tonight. I want to try as best I can for us to get some clarity. And the reason, again, that I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about it now, is first, I believe it's timely. Um, Tomorrow, you all know that the Jeffrey Epstein files are supposed to be released by the Department of Justice. Supposed to happen. Again, with this administration, again, it's supposed to happen tomorrow. Okay. And for those of you who may not be aware, Jeffrey Epstein, who is now deceased, had been accused and tried and convicted of some heinous crimes against minors, against young people. There was human trafficking, sex trafficking going on. There's a whole lot of stuff that was going on there, and apparently, a lot of very, very powerful people from our current president, maybe a former president, and some other very, very powerful people may have been all caught up in this. Okay. And so this idea uh, is one that is really very pertinent and relevant right now. Again, for those of us who watch the news, it seems like every single week there is another story of a youth pastor or a senior pastor or a scout leader or a politician who has been beating their chest about family values and sexual purity. Find them in the bathroom at the airport doing things that they ought not do, or touching children inappropriately, or they have found sexual abuse photographs and videos on their computer. All of these things seem to be going on, and some would think that it's happening more often. I don't think it's happening more often. I just think that technology now uh, helps us to be able to discover that these things are happening. Okay. And so it's just being revealed more. Okay. And so, with that being said, we need to know, we need to understand, particularly for those of us who are either in or adjacent to churches, because this is going on in the church in ways that are heartbreaking. How can there be this dichotomy of this kind of abuse going on in the church? Am I by myself? I don't know. Maybe I just have a certain sensitivity to this because I'm a pastor. Anybody else feeling incensed or outraged or confused? Put that in the chat. Just whatever you're thinking, however you feel about this, even if you just think it's nasty, if that's all you got to say about it. Okay. But I believe that we have to give words, and we have to give space to those words that we feel concerning this. And so again, that is my endeavor tonight, talking about this theology of the Christian pedophile. Okay. And so I live here in Texas. Most of you know that. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And here, there was a story, maybe it broke about a year ago, but more recently, um, there was a story of Robert Morris. Robert Morris is a local pastor here of a very, very large network of churches who um, was allegedly involved in sexual abuse of a young girl. He's been found guilty, but for the sake of, any type of legalities and litigious nature of how people are, allegedly. But again, we feel how we feel about these things. Robert Morris, who was one of the president's uh, spiritual advisors, again, was found guilty. He has been convicted. And it really rocked us here in this area. Okay. And again, if you live here in Dallas-Fort Worth, you're familiar with Gateway. There's probably 30 or 40, maybe even 50,000 members of this church across all of their different campuses. It is enormous. And for this man to be in such a prominent place in Christendom, in the political sphere, in general influence, for him to be found guilty of this, again, I believe is just indicative of a greater problem that's going on inside of our churches. And so this whole situation with Robert Morris, we've heard for many years some of the things that have been alleged in the Catholic Church. The number of people who have come forth to say that they were abused as young children, whether they were girls or boys. We have seen a situation here just a few years ago with the Southern Baptist Church, the largest Protestant denomination in the country. The Southern Baptist Church had a huge issue with this just a few years ago. Um, Even, and again, that's on the Christian side, but even on a more secular side that really kind of does get tied into Christianity, even the stuff with Diddy, like I said, and even with Epstein, for all of this stuff to be going on. And then the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who again proclaims to be a Christian, and so many others on the right, and I do mean on the right side of the aisle, not on the right side of morality or character or integrity, but who sit on the right side politically, seem to be adamant in protecting these Epstein files, or adamant in trying to push these things under the rug or cover these things up. And for the life of me, I don't understand it. But I do know that there is a theological perspective that guides their actions. And that's what I want to try to dig into tonight. I also want to talk a little bit about like the right-wing media. I don't watch Fox News. I do get glimpses of what they're saying here and there. And it is just amazing to me how, again, even these media outlets try to protect some of these child abusers and sex offenders and so forth, and how they attempt to normalize things like, I don't know if you all know, but there are a lot of these politicians who don't want any age restrictions on the age of marriage. They want young girls to be able to be given in marriage. Uh, all kinds of crazy stuff are going on. And again, Christians are at the center of it. So, why do I need to talk about this? I need to talk about it because I'm a pastor, plain and simple. And the responsibility of those of us who are called to be pastors is really twofold. One, harm reduction. We are to place ourselves in position to do whatever we can to reduce harm to the people, however that harm shows up. And then on the flip side of that, the positive side of that, as pastors, our responsibility is to enact or put forth a theology that enables human flourishing. So not only do we not want you to be harmed, but we want you to flourish. We want you to have a good life, a happy life, an abundant life. Okay. And so as a pastor, I feel compelled to really talk about this tonight. And so let's dig into it. Let's talk about it. Okay. I want to make sure we understand the words that we're talking about when we talk about the theology of the Christian pedophile. It's first important to understand what theology is. Again, if you have followed Shake the Table, if you have followed Will Horn Ministries or my ministry in any iteration, you hear me talk about theology all the time. But I want to remediate. Theology, if we were to put it in simple terms, is God talk. It's how you talk about God. Any word that ends in ology means the study of. Theo means God. So theo or theology is the study of God. And so in studying God, we come up with these ideas about God. And these ideas about God, again, inform the words that we have about God. That's where the God talk comes from. Okay. Again, I tell you that how we come up with theology is based upon kind of these four pillars. It is called the Wesleyan quadrilateral. Some people call it the Methodist quadrilateral. It's based on four things. It's going to be based upon scripture. It's going to be based upon tradition, based also on logic or reason. And then it's based on experience. So scripture, tradition, logic, and experience are the four things that we all use to come up with this theological perspective, this God talk. That's what theology is. The next question is what is a Christian? Now, there's a whole lot of debate about that's going on right now, because again, how can the oppressor and the oppressed claim the same religion? How can the oppressor and the oppressed claim to worship the same God? How can the oppressor and the oppressed claim the same exemplar, Jesus Christ? Okay. And so this idea of what Christianity is in flux. There are some people who have vehement disagreements about what Christianity is, but generally speaking, most people would agree in terms of a definition that Christianity are the rites, rituals, practices, traditions that align us with the message, methods, and ministry of Jesus Christ. Simply stated, to be a Christian is to follow Jesus Christ. Can we agree on that? Okay. Well, the problem is right now with so many people who claim Christianity is that some people see Christianity where Jesus is our model. Others claim Christianity to be where Jesus is just our idol. As a matter of fact, let me talk about that right now before I get off of it, because I don't want to lose that. See, when we see Jesus as our model, then we do our best to do and say the things that Jesus did and said. We look in the Gospels, we see how Jesus dealt with poor people, and how Jesus dealt with people who were sick, and how Jesus dealt with the immigrant, and how Jesus talked about relationship with God and relationship with one another. We are looking to see as much as we can what we can learn from the life of Jesus so we can apply it to our own lives. Okay, that is one model of Christianity. Then there are others who are not necessarily interested at all in following Jesus. They have come to the place where they lift Jesus up and worship Jesus as an idol, but do not live according to the model of Jesus. And so that's how you get some people who are devout disciples. And then that's how you get other people who are in the Klan, or who are neo-Nazis, or who are white supremacists, but they also claim Christianity. Okay. So this whole notion of what Christianity is again, it is arguable. The next question that I would have us to answer, just again coming out of this title, is what is pedophilia? Are y'all okay with me using that word? That we're grown folks, okay? What is pedophilia? Pedophilia is having sexual feelings or sexual attraction or sexual arousal for children. Pedophilia is an adult person who has sexual feelings, sexual attraction, sexual arousal for children. I want to throw another word in here. It is really very important, particularly as we are having this conversation that's kind of rooted in the Bible. Because again, I'm going to talk about some text here in just a moment. But there's another word that you need to know. It is pederasty, P-E-D-E-R-A-S-T-Y. Okay, so we have pedophilia and we have pederasty. Okay, pederasty is rooted in pedophilia, but it kind of goes a step further in that beyond feelings, this is actually having sexual encounters with children. If you are to look in First Corinthians, where Paul is kind of talking about what people call homosexuality, he's actually talking about pederasty, where there were older men who were having sexual relationships with younger boys. That's another use of the term pederasty. Okay. So again, it's important to know what all of these words are. And again, I want to try to deal with these intersections. And so the question would be here, how is it possible that people who call themselves Christians can be guilty of pedophilia or pederasty or worse? And I want to put something forth here for us to just kind of massage, and just go with me here. Okay. When we ask the question, how can someone who claims Christianity be guilty of these things or be guilty of covering for people who are guilty of these things. Uh, a lot of times people will use the argument that, well, hey, in biblical times, you know, uh, people got married young girls. It was acceptable that, a young teenage girl would be given to an older man. It's in the Bible. That's what they tell you. It's in the Bible. And I want to make sure that we understand again some things about the Bible. Just because it's in the Bible, one doesn't necessarily mean that it is right or that it gels with what we believe to be right and good morally today. Okay. And the other thing too, we have to understand sometimes things in the Bible, just because it is descriptive of a certain situation, it doesn't mean that it is prescriptive. Okay, just because they were doing these things, and just because we see it written in the text or written of or described in the text, it doesn't mean that you're supposed to take that and apply that to your life prescriptively. Okay, so I want to make sure we understand that. But again, a lot of people who claim Christianity and who for whatever reason feel okay with these encounters or these attractions to children, again, they will use the Bible to give a permission structure for that. Okay. So again, when we look particularly in the Hebrew Bible, the Bible is describing these ancient Near Eastern practices, things like early betrothal. And that basically means, again, a father giving his daughter away to an older man. Okay. Again, in that time, because you have to remember that women or girls were owned by their father until they were owned by their husband. It's a totally different time, totally different way of looking at things. And so we have to understand culturally what we are reading. And just because, again, something may have been culturally acceptable at that time, it does not mean that it's culturally acceptable today. Okay. And so, again, this whole idea of, well, if people did it in the Bible, then we should be able to do it today. Well, if that's the case, then the question would be, how do you feel about polygamy? Or how do you feel about having a bunch of concubines? Or how do you feel about arranged marriages without consent? Because again, all of those things were in the Bible as well. And so again, if we're gonna pick one thing, then we have to ask ourselves, what theological process or what analytical process have we gone through to be able to throw the other things out? We can't just cherry pick, so to speak. And so again, a lot of people will use these examples, like, let's say, Rebecca and Isaac, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Abraham's son Isaac. If you read in Genesis chapter 24, 25, it talks about Isaac seeing Rebecca. She was going down to the water, to the stream to get a bucket of water. And he looked out and he said she was stunning. She was stunningly beautiful. And that she was a pure virgin. That was the word that's used in the King James. She was a pure virgin, that no man had ever touched her. Well, we find out later on in Genesis chapter 25 that Isaac's old ass, Isaac in chapter 25 is 40 years old. So this Rebecca, she may have been 13, 12, 15, 14, somewhere in there. But Isaac was 40. It says in Genesis 25 and 40 that Isaac married her. Now, the question that I have got, again, for us in this society, is if a 40-year-old man is out looking at a young girl, that may be somewhere between 12 and 15 years old and is lusting after her, and then her father gives her away to this 40-year-old man I don't care what's in the Bible. That's not going to float. Not in my family, not in my house. But again, there are people who look to examples like that in the Bible and say, again, if it was true in the Bible, then it needs to be okay for me now. Another example, and this may get me in trouble with some of y'all, but I got to say it. We have to raise these things we have to question some things. Okay. And again, just because we question the text or we dig into the text, it doesn't mean that we're taking away the sacredity of the text or the value or the holiness of the text. But again, we have to understand that we are dealing with folklore, with stories, with accounts that were written by people who lived in a certain context. We have to be able to analyze it critically. Okay, and so I want to analyze this whole notion of Mary and Joseph. You know Mary, the mother of Jesus. When Mary was betrothed or given to or promised to Joseph, it is said that Mary was between maybe 12 and 14 years old. She had just maybe come upon puberty, had just become a young woman, as they would call it in those times. She was a very young girl. At the time, it is estimated that Joseph was probably somewhere in his 20s. So again, a 12 or 13-year-old girl with a man in their 20s does not gel in today's society. I don't care what was in the Bible. And see, here's the issue. We have to understand what so many people do as it relates to this Bible. And this is why this Bible is dangerous. Trying to apply these ancient texts, again, that were written by a very, very different people to a very specific group of people for very specific rhetorical reasons. And none of those people knew that some 2,000, 3,000 years later, we would be reading these texts, trying to apply them to our lives. We have to be very, very careful because, again, the weapon, I call the Bible a weapon of mass destruction when it's in the hand of a novice. In other words, in the hand of somebody that doesn't know how to read it. Okay. And so, again, just because we see these stories in the Bible, it does not mean that these stories become examples for us. Okay. And so a lot of historians, again, say, Mary was somewhere between 12, 14, 15. They don't know exactly, but she was a very young teenager when Jesus was born. I'm going to go a little further here. Because again, we're going to get to this theology, this ideology that many of these male abusers and some female abusers, but predominantly male abusers, where they get these ideas from. I'm wondering what it says about God, that God would tap a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girl, however old she was. Why would God choose a girl so young and impregnate her? Y'all feeling where I'm going with this? Does this young woman, this young girl, have the ability to even consent to this? Does God take away Mary's agency? Does God disrespect or violate Mary's bodily autonomy by impregnating her? This is a hard question to ask. I'm putting myself out here even by doing this. But to do theology, we have to sit with these very, very hard questions. Because again, people who are literalists when they read the Bible, or fundamentalists in their attempt to interpret the Bible, if they are to look at this scenario, this threesome here that's going on with Joseph and Mary and God, do we have another scenario here where these two more powerful male figures have taken advantage of a vulnerable young girl? This is how we do theology. These are the hard questions that you ask. Anybody ever thought about this before? And so again, when we come to this notion of the Christian pedophile, the person who looks to the Bible to understand God, or looks to the Bible to understand themselves as the man of God, when they do their theology based upon their ability to interpret scripture and they see things like this, we have to ask ourselves, how then do they apply these things that they see? And could this now be the reason that in our churches, there are so many people who are guilty of this? Because in their own minds, they've interpreted the Bible correctly. Woe unto us who are not able to rightly divide the word. But that's just something for you to think about. I don't have any answers there. I'm not making any definitive statements. But I just want you to ask yourself, is it possible that these people see themselves justified in their actions based upon their interpretations of the Bible? Okay, so again, the first thing that they're doing here is trying to use the Bible to justify their actions. The second thing that's going on here that I want to speak to very clearly is patriarchal theology, or this idea of patriarchy, or a male-dominated perspective. When you read the text, again, you have to look at history. You have to look at the culture of the time of the text. Okay, when we look, particularly in the New Testament, we have to understand that they were in the context of a Greco-Roman society, a Greco-Roman society, and these people had certain ways of doing things. Okay, in a Greco-Roman society, they were they worshipped many different gods. They were polytheistic. Okay, within that context, you had the Hebrew people, and they worshiped Jehovah. But again, all around them, they had people who worshipped and lived in different kinds of ways. So, in this Greco-Roman society, is this idea of the household. That's a word that there's a whole lot that goes into that. But basically, what it means is the householder, or the patriarch, was responsible for everything in his household, and his household would include his land, cattle, children, his wife, his slaves. All of that was a part of what was called the household. Okay, within the household, everything had the householder's name. Again, for Black people, this is how most of us ended up with names that sound European. My ancestors that came from the motherland were not named Horn, but the people who owned my ancestors on this land, the household that we were a part of, was Horn. Okay, and so when we understand this idea of the household and understand patriarchy, or the patriarch, their power, their authority was absolute. They could do what they want. Well, there were some rules that they had to follow within. But again, the householder had great brevity in what it is that they decided to do. And so I bring this up as it relates to sexuality, because again, if the mindset of this patriarchal group, this hierarchy, where people could do whatever it is that they want to do, this whole idea of agency for slaves and women and children, all of that stuff goes away. You don't get to make decisions about your own body under a patriarchy or under the householder system that was in the Greco-Roman society. You don't get to make those decisions. Okay. And so, again, when we look at the writings of Paul, when we look at all of these other things that are going on here in these first century writings, we have to understand that they have been influenced by Greco-Roman culture. I feel like I might be going a little bit too deep, but I need y'all to understand how even today, American society, our government, and so many other things are based upon these Greco-Roman ideas. It's a carryover. And so to bring this patriarchy, this male dominated or androcentric idea, it is still living in this country today. This is nothing new. They had something there also. There's this an idea called homosexuality. When I was taking some New Testament classes back when I was in seminary, it was fascinating to learn and understand there's these people's ideas about sexuality. They had something called homosexuality. Now, again, it's probably a term you've never heard of before, but basically, this is the embrace again of this patriarchal perspective when it comes to sexuality. In homosexuality, it was all about male dominance. Okay. And so they had the idea of an active sexual partner and a passive sexual partner. That passive sexual partner could be a woman, it could be a boy or a slave or a young girl. In homosexuality, basically, that patriarch, that householder, wherever he decided to put his penis was allowed. Unless, maybe if he was using somebody else's slave or something like that in another house. But again, if you were in that household, you belonged to that householder and they could do whatever they wanted to do with you sexually. If you come back to Bible study, I could really kind of talk about Philemon and what that really meant and all of that kind of stuff and why Paul brought the slave back and all of that. But it had to do with homosexuality. And I would have you all to understand that there are people to this day, powerful people in this country who still believe that they can put their penis anywhere and they should not be held accountable for that. I hope this is making sense in how that way back in ancient times ties itself to what it is that we are dealing with today. Okay. So you've got these, again, ideas of having been given a permission structure through biblical interpretation, poor biblical interpretation. But again, they feel like they've got those examples. That's the first thing that's going on. Second thing that's going on here is patriarchy. The third thing that's going on is plain old hypocrisy. There are people who call themselves Christians who are carrying on and doing doing these things over here, but then they judge you or penalize you for doing those same things. It is hypocritical. Matthew chapter 23, Jesus spends a whole lot of time talking about hypocrites. You all have read it before. He says, woe unto them for being hypocrites. He called them blind guides and snakes and vipers. He says that, you spend all of your time trying to clean the outside of the cup, but on the inside, you're dirty. He says you gag at a gnat, but then you swallow a camel. You're a false prophet. All of these things Jesus talks about. And I want to say very, very clearly that there are a lot of people in these churches who are nothing more than run-of-the-mill hypocrites. They're in positions of power, and they believe that there is one set of rules for them and another set of rules for the rest of us. That's how we get here. And these people call themselves Christians, just like the Pharisees. And so again, when we talk about how it is that these people can call themselves Christians and also commit these heinous crimes against children, Many of them literally feel like they have a right to do it. And they feel like that right is based in the Bible. This is why, beloved, I spend so much time, and again, people think that it's overkill sometimes on my part. This is why I spend so much time really encouraging you to read for yourself, encouraging you to have hard conversations, encouraging you to really challenge the things that are written in the Bible, because again, there's so much misinterpretation and mistranslation and misunderstanding and misapplication that it gets us all twisted up and tied up simply because we don't understand what this Bible is and how to read it. And so I was about to say the last thing, but this is not the last thing. It's an important thing, but this is not the last thing. There is an idea called Imago Dei. Emago, Imago Dei, basically means the image of God. There is a major problem with people identifying with religion, Christianity in particular, who do not see their fellow man, their fellow human being in the image of God. They may see themselves in the image of God. That's why many times you will see God depicted as an old white man. They may see themselves depicted that way. I believe it's one of the reasons that so many Christian people, evangelicals in particular, white evangelicals, see Trump in the image of God or as God's man. Because again, if you think of God as angry and jealous and vengeful and violent and old and white, Trump is all of those things. And so when we get this whole Imago Dei thing twisted up, then our theology is twisted up. And so if we see someone who has been convicted of 34 felonies, who has been found liable for millions and millions of dollars in fraud, who has lied incessantly, continuously, who has done all of these things that seem to be completely antithetical to the Christian moral compass. But if theologically, the way that we think about God and see God and talk about God, if all of those things that we find in the old Hebrew lore, if we find those things to be true about God, it's not hard for us to find those things in ourselves and justify those things. And so if we see ourselves in the image of God, I'm talking about people who may commit these pedophilic crimes. And again, I'm talking about white people here. I'm going to talk because the truth is there are a whole lot of folks in Black families and brown families who are also guilty of this. But again, I believe in many instances, it comes down to those same three issues. Either some misapplication of the Bible where they feel like they are justified in doing what it is that they do, that either they are hypocrites or that they are leaning so much into patriarchy that they feel like that they, again, are not accountable. They can do whatever it is that they want to do. But I want us to understand where the mindset comes from. And so the other things here that we've got to know and understand about how this has become so rampant in our churches and in our families and amongst people who call themselves Christian. This goes to a lot of the conversation that I've had about sexuality in general. The church does not give us space to have healthy, honest conversations about what's going on with us sexually. Pedophilia is sexual deviance. It is sexual abuse. But again, if people were in places where they were able to talk about those things in open and honest kinds of ways, then maybe there could be help and direction and protection for these victims. But we don't have that in our spaces. And it is because too many Christians are afraid of the whole conversation about sex and sexuality. Oh, if we could just get free sexually, it would change our theologies. And if we would change our theology, it would change the way that we deal with one another. And so tonight, I'm not trying to create this understanding for you to create space and say, oh, I understand why the poor pedophile is that way. And maybe we should give them some more grace. I believe in grace and all the things, but I also believe that when we harm the most vulnerable among us, there should be consequences. There is a way that grace and justice can coexist. Justice has to be done for the most vulnerable among us. And so I want to call this to our attention. Most of us in this space right now identify as Christians or neo-Christian or former Christians or somewhere in that group. There are others of us who do not, but there is still a responsibility that each of us have to be vigilant, to stand for justice. And basically what that is liberating those who have been oppressed or marginalized or harmed by power structures, by patriarchy and hierarchical structures. And the church and many very powerful people in the church not only do these crimes, cause this harm, but they're also protective of it. And we have to pull the covers off of it. And so I want to say this to each of you. If you know this is going on or has gone on, say something about it, because people need to be held accountable, because our children need to be protected. If this is something that you are a victim of and that you've never shared with anybody, there's two things here I want to do. I want to first let you know that I'm praying for you. But second, I want you to do the work that you need to do to find wholeness and healing. If you've never gone to counseling, if you've never been able to talk about this in healthy ways, you owe that to yourself. You owe it to your future. And then I want to speak directly to any of you who may end up seeing this video at a later time. If you are a perpetrator, if you have done this harm, or if you have covered this harm, I pray that justice comes to you swiftly. I pray that you repent in your heart, and I pray that you would present yourself to receive whatever justice has for you. This type of abuse is not the will of God. This type of abuse cannot stand. And so I encourage you. I pray that even as I'm speaking these words and you're hearing them, that conviction would come. And so tonight, I know it sounds crazy, but yes, even the pedophile has a theological perspective that guides their abusive behavior. And as we understand theology, again, that's why I had to study it. As a pastoral or practical theologian, I have to try to understand how people see God. So then, from a pastoral perspective, we can address making adjustments and helping those people to move in their theological perspectives so that they don't harm others or harm themselves. All right. I hope y'all heard what I had to say right here. I am trying to do my best. I'm trying to do my best to be a responsible voice in this spiritual space. because everything is not about jumping and dancing and shouting and the choir singing and all of that kind of stuff. Sometimes we got to dig into some very, very deep and painful theological discourse. Because if we don't get down at the root, it's going to keep growing back and it's going to keep growing back. So again, I appreciate you all for having the courage to be a part of a conversation like this. Okay. All right. That's all I got for you. Okay. Now, again, I told you we're trying to grow this community. I want to make sure that those of you who are not connected yet, to get connected. Every time we got to shake the table going forth, we try to send out a text notification. We sent out one today. If you want to be on that text thread so that you don't miss anything that's going on with Shake the Table, I want you to text the word shake, SHAKE, to the number 866-646-3888. Okay. And you'll be a part of that text thread. I want to also encourage you all, if you have not become or have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, I want you to do that. Again, we're trying to grow this channel. It opens up other opportunities and ways for us to reach even more people when you subscribe. And so if you would do me a favor today, I want you to like this video. Click the little like. I want you to share it with somebody, and I want you to subscribe. I'm trying to learn all of this stuff about algorithms and all of that kind of thing. And from what I'm understanding is when you do those things, it affects the algorithm and more people are able to see what it is we're talking about over here. Okay. And so you see there, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel at the official Will Horn. That's where you are right now. Just make sure you subscribe and click the bell. And then also for those of you who are blessed by this ministry and want to help support what it is that we do and defray some of the costs that come with trying to produce this, you can send your gifts. You can either send them here at Cash App at Will Horn Ministries, $ Will Horn Ministries. Or I don't have the little thing in the little chyron down here, but you can go to explorewillhorn.com. That's my website. And you can send your gifts there. I'm so grateful to those of you who do. Some of you send gifts every month. And I want you to know and understand that that really makes a difference. It really means something. And so I really appreciate you all for that. Next week is Christmas, so we will not be here. I may drop a little short video or something like that to encourage you all, but we will not be live on next Thursday. I want you all to be able to take time to enjoy your family, to spend some time in self-care and reflection and getting ready for next year. I want y'all to know I got a little New Year's message that's going to be coming up. I'll tell you all about it a little bit later, but I believe that 2026 is going to be a banner year for us. I believe that God is going to reveal more and more of God's self to us, and that we are going to really begin to walk in the fullness of what God has for us. Okay. So I want you all to know that I love you from the bottom of my soul, and that I pray God's very, very best in whatever it is you decide to do. Okay. Y'all take it easy tonight.